Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Let's Write an Adventure, our ongoing live stream where we are creating a completely custom campaign in real time. I'm RJ Kerr, I'm your host, and today we're going to be talking about assigning legendary actions to custom monsters. Before we jump into that, I want to do a quick recap of what we've done so far in case you're new to the stream or you haven't seen some of the recent episodes, just get you all caught up. So, as I mentioned, we are creating a completely custom campaign from scratch, and this includes a unique domain of dread with all of the pieces and parts that go into that. To give ourselves a little bit of structure to work with, something that we can use as kind of a guideline from which to deviate and to make sure we're not missing any critical parts, we're going to be using a story circle structure. And this really is just sort of a version of the hero's journey, segmented out for easy use and use of storytelling. But bear in mind that this is not designed to give us we're not using this as in terms of giving us a rigid plot. We're doing this to make sure that we have all the pieces and parts that make a good story, and so that we have something from which to deviate as we're working. We've done a lot to start filling this out. We have figured out how our characters enter into this domain of dread through a portal that opens up on the Blood Moon. We have talked about what kind of motivations would draw our characters in through this portal. We figured out where they land in a shanty town that we're calling Darkport that sits on the edge of an inland sea. And we figured out that this inland sea is actually a big part of this domain of dread, that it was once the basin of a thriving metropolis that is now fallen to ruin and become flooded. So lots of cool little adventure sites to dig into there once we get there. We have also figured out that this domain houses a dreadlord known as Ovander, who is an elemental evil that we are still figuring out exactly how he interacts with the characters throughout this adventure and what that dynamic might be like. We have figured out our very first adventure. We wrote one where the characters are kidnapped and briefly enslaved and have to escape their captors, and in doing so, discover the existence of a long lost artifact that gives the wielder some modicum of power, some modicum of control over this domain of dread. And they realize that finding and retrieving this artifact is their best hope for getting out of the domain alive. And so now we're working on a part of the adventure that is a proactive section. So far, a lot of things have kind of happened to the characters. They've been responding to it. Now it's about them getting out of the world, making a lot of their own decisions, and having a lot of opportunities to go and explore and find this artifact. And we do this by using a node structure style. And so effectively, these nodes, or as I prefer to call them, investigative scenes, are moments in the adventure where the characters have the opportunity to find usually about three or more clues that can lead them in different directions that connect to other nodes, other investigative scenes. That way, they don't have to find them all. They can find some of them. They can find none of them. They can find all of them. They've got all kinds of little threads they can follow, and they can really chart their own way through the adventure. Gives them a ton of agency, but also gives us as DMs some structure to work with. Because we know that we have these little pinpoints, these nodes, these investigative scenes that we can create and spread around the world, and so we don't have to come up with everything right off the cuff or directly in between sessions every single time. And so these nodes, these investigative scenes, can be any kind of structure. That can be any kind of interaction, and we're doing a lot of variation there. We've done a simple social encounter. We've done a complex social encounter with more obstacles and hurdles and complications. We've done 5 room dungeons. We've done high style adventures. We'll have some bigger, full blown dungeons and some smaller adventures and some stuff that's all in between there. But right now, we have recently built out one that was started as a simple social encounter where the characters go and talk to a former monster hunter to get some information that they're looking for. And this monster hunter has an obsession with a monster that he was never able to slay. Think Moby Dick kind of deal here, where it's the one that got away and it'll haunt him forever. And so this generates a side quest. The characters are asked to go hunt down and destroy this monster. And we have been building a unique creature for this, one that affects the memories of those who see it, so that as soon as they're not looking at it, it's wiped away from their memories. People forget it. A creature that is a series of clones that evolve and get stronger as each successive clone is destroyed. Um, making it a pretty difficult foe and setting it up pretty nicely for kind of that classic party against singular monster sort of fight with several iterations and to really build the tension and make this an exciting encounter. And so we set out to create this monster from scratch, and we've done a lot of work on this. We have figured out all of the special features that it has. We have done all the crunchy math bits to come up with its hard stats like armor class, hit points, attack damage and DCs and all that kind of stuff. And we finished off last session with the note that we probably need some legendary actions for this creature just to make it a little more viable in a fight where it is grossly outnumbered to balance out the action economy, if you will. So that is what we're going to work on today. And I'll share my screen in just a second here. But before I do, just a reminder, this is an interactive live stream. So as you have thoughts, comments, questions, ideas, opinions, and anything else you want to talk about, jump in the chat, my friends. I love hearing from you. Come up with some really cool ideas. Last time is a great example of this. Um, and Yeah, this keeps the chat fresh, keeps our ideas coming, and comes up with some truly unique stuff. So please don't hesitate. And if you're watching the recording of this, jump in the comments for the same thing. I love hearing from you there, and I respond to those as quickly as I can. All right, with that being said, let me go ahead and share my screen. And so we have our Borkora, I will settle on a pronunciation for that at some point. Um, and so, like I said, we've done the vast majority of stuff in here. We still have things like, we have before we kind of named and settled on a name, we've got like TK monster references in here. And even after we did, we kept using it because we can control find and replace those. We've still got some XX where we need to put in saving throws, so we know that those saving throws DCs are 13 at this point, so we can fill those in kind of as we go. And we had talked about there being some sort of pod linked effect where when one of the clone pods is destroyed, the creature is subject to some kind of psychic effect, and we never really pinned down what that was. And we may come back to that. We may decide to leave that in the dust. We've got a lot going on here. We'll see. But for first, we I think we definitely need some legendary actions to again smooth out the action economy, right? Action economy is something that we talk a lot about in terms of keeping the characters from being overwhelmed, but it's also something to think about when you're trying to keep your challenge, your monsters from being overwhelmed. Because a monster that or a creature, an opponent, or anything like uh, that is outnumbered its by the player characters fighting it can frankly take a creature that would be a terrifying encounter normally and turn it into one that's almost trivial, done in a couple rounds, sometimes even done within a round, simply because of just the amount of opportunities the characters have to hit it versus the amount of opportunities it has to hit the characters. And so legendary actions are a great way to kind of balance that out a little bit, to give a singular creature a little more durability, a little more you know opportunity to hit back when they are outnumbered, which can make you know eh, which can make an encounter a lot more fun, a lot more exciting, especially when you're going up against something iconic, a legendary creature, one might say, hence the term legendary actions. So that doesn't mean that you're limited to dragons when you do this sort of stuff, or chimeras or what have you. But we can add them to any sort of creature, and in this case, I think it's a really good idea. So let's start working on those. Heading legendary actions and divider. That's what I want. Cool. All right. So before we jump into this, quick couple comments in the chat here. Looks like we've got some highs and lows. Good to see some regulars here. Mr. Max, Jonathan Frost, Ben Elder. Always good to have you here. Thanks for joining today. Look forward to hearing your ideas as we talk about legendary actions. Um, so legendary actions, you know, there are no hard and fast rules about this, right? There's no, well, when you do legendary actions, they've got to have, three legendary actions every round, and or at least two, no more than four, or anything along those lines. This is a pretty loosey goosey sort of area here, so it gives you a place to really kind of massage some of the creature's abilities here. The one thing to watch out for is to uh, to recognize that if you're going to make some of these abilities damaging, it will affect the creature's challenge rating, because it goes into that total damage output per round. Um, or well, per turn kind of data here. Um, so yeah, so that's something that we may or may want to do. If we do that, we may need to adjust some of these numbers here on the various attacks. But there's other things that we can do. Typically, I start with the assumption that the creature is going to get 3 legendary actions per round, all of which, as normal, have to be taken at the end of another creature's turn. Um, so, so we lost my train of thought here for a second. Yeah, so we can use that to sort of adjust what it can do. So if we decide that, for example, we want to put an extra attack in here, we can say that it takes 2 legendary actions to do that one attack, meaning they can only do it once per turn, once per round, instead of being able to do it 3 times per round, thus limiting the change in the CR, or things like that. But I also think it's a lot of fun when you do legendary actions that don't do damage, that they just do other conditions or give it more mobility, or what have you, because this is an opportunity to make this a very mobile, very dynamic sort of fight, which is something a lot of combats don't have when you worry about things like attacks of opportunity. All right. So before we jump to this, looks like Ben's got a reminder here, that Monday he mentioned a legendary action where it could shift its place in initiative as a reaction to confront a threat, while making sure it doesn't go twice in a round. Yeah. So as we talked about on Monday, I think there is something really innovative and really cool at the core of that idea. Um, the idea that it so Um, yeah, so the idea it uh, um, that it can make adjustments to sort of counter a potential, a growing threat, a potential adversary, something like that, um, is a really cool idea. Um, I personally wouldn't pin that to the initiative order. Um, One, because I think you're going to end up in a situation, no matter how you cut it, that it's going to end up going twice. It's going to get 2 turns before some characters get one. Um, you know, or it's going to become a moot point, because even if it doesn't get to go again, it just changes place in its initiative order, and that doesn't, and that doesn't end up mattering much in the wash of things here. So, in terms of what it can do, but I like the idea that it should have some way to react and confront to a threat. Um, that's something to chew on. There's got to be a couple other ways to do this. For example, there's things like legendary resistance, which we could toss in here if we wanted to do that, giving it a certain number of times that it can just straight up save. Um, we could give it some sort of defensive legendary action. Maybe um, a shell reflection or something along those lines. Something that is equivalent to like a another creature's kind of like parry, right, or a shield spell or something that gives it the ability to, as a legendary action or as a reaction, probably. We'd probably make that a reaction, not a legendary action. Has the ability to activate this and potentially turn a hit into a miss. with a spell attack or something along those lines, or a physical attack or what have you along those lines. Um, so that might tell us if we want to work something like that in there, we might want to go ahead and do reactions as well. Divider, cool. TBD. Um, let's see. Mr. Mex says, I've only had experience with one legendary action and it traumatized me. Rip, irk. So this will be a learning experience for me. Uh, yeah, that was actually just that was just a bonus action. That wasn't even a legendary action, Mr. Mex. So, uh, yeah. Uh, yeah, but legendary actions are a lot of fun. I did a bunch of legendary actions in a combat I ran for some players last night as part of a Ghost Assault Marsh campaign, and it was it's a fun way to kind of break out combat sometimes, especially with a singular creature. Ben Elder says maybe a legendary burrow action. It tunnels into the wet earth and bursts out with an attack at a target in range. PCs can make a perception check to give a disadvantage on the attack. Um, Potentially, again, if we at all can, I would like to steer away from doing more damage with these. Um, Effects here, simply because one, it's going to change the challenge rating of our monster. It's going to throw all these careful calculations we've done, out the window. We're going to have to make adjustments. Um, and two, I think there is a tendency to lean on attacks as kind of a like, well, let's make it do more damage. Well, let's give it something that it can hit harder or what have you. But we have an opportunity with legendary actions um, to really do some creative stuff that force that force these combats into very dynamic, very mobile sorts of situations. Like to your point about the burrow action there, yeah, doing something where it can burrow or swim or move, its movement speed without provoking an attack of opportunity or something along those lines as it gets a burst of speed. It gives it a lot of mobility through this encounter space here, forcing the characters to kind of run around and follow it and change their tactics and that kind of thing. And that doesn't change its CR at all. Same thing with like a reflective effect, for example, we were talking about. If it has something you can do to respond to an incoming threat, the ability to um, uh, you know the uh, uh, the ability to do whatever the physical equivalent in this case of like a shield spell is something that again doesn't really change the challenge rating on this creature at all. It simply adds one layer of durability, and so it doesn't affect the rest of this. Um, so, while yes, you absolutely can add some damage outputs for legendary actions and reactions, and I I would like to challenge us and say let's steer away from damaging attacks for this and come up with some other stuff that adds even more creativity to this already very unique monster. Um, let's see here. Ben Older says a way to close the gap. Yeah, I agree. Having some movement, I think, is a really good thing for legendary actions in here, because especially this is a close range monster. Getting it, giving it an ability to get up close really fast and to change those distances again makes it, a, I think, a more dynamic challenge. Um, Mr. Mex says, "Wow, traumatized by a bonus action. Well played, sir." Well, in my defense, Mr. Mex, the trauma came from your emotional attachment to that goblin and my willingness to destroy it. So, you know, it's for all you for all you DMs out there. The trauma doesn't come from the action economy. The trauma comes from the emotional investment. um, all right. So let's go ahead and capture some of these ideas before we lose them, before we completely get down our various rabbit holes here. So let's say reflective shell. and will TBD. We'll come up. We may come up with a different name for that, but that response to to an incoming threat, and then we can say, well, we're going to want a statement and legendary actions about how many they get, what they can use them for, yada yada. And then let's say a mobility one. We'll come up with something for that. Generally want at least, generally, if you're going to have however many legendary actions you're going to have, you want at least that many options for legendary actions. Not that you can't repeat them, you certainly can, but it gives you a little more flavor. So, or a little more, a few more tools in your tool belt. So let's say TBD one, and then we will do another one there. And for the legendary actions, a little bit here, we'll say TK Monster has, let's say, 3 legendary actions, which it can take. 3 legendary actions. It can choose one action from the list below to use at the end of another creature's turn. Only one legendary action can be used at a time. TK Monster regains all legendary actions at the start of its turn. Simple, straightforward verbiage and that kind of thing. Let's see here. Mr. Mex was hooked with. Yeah. Well, I'm glad you're hooked, man. It was a good. Mr. Mex, that was a fun time. Lost Man of Phandelver is a good one there. To answer your question here, Jonathan Frost, RG, remind me, is a CR3 correct? Yes, this is a CR3. And your question about does CR3 not get legendary actions? There's no limitation on level that you can get legendary actions on. Most creatures that come out, in things like the Monsters Manual, lower level ones don't have legendary actions, but that's not a rule. That's not a stipulation of the rule set. That's simply how it's, most of them have been designed. But we can see allusions to this if we go to Xanathar's, where there is in the encounter building section, it talks about legendary, talks about solo monster versus party challenge ratings, and they mention in there that they're discussing monsters, they're discussing legendary monsters in that case, and they reference monsters CR3 and lower in that. So there's no hard and fast rule that says that CR3 monsters can or cannot have legendary actions. That is entirely up to you. And frankly, even if there was a hard and fast rule, we can change it. So nothing to hold us back from doing this. In fact, I think there is a lot of opportunity for some lower level monsters to have legendary actions, especially when you're trying to make a cool BBEG for a low level party. All right, so we talked about there being one about mobility, so the ability to move without provoking attacks of opportunity, and then we've got a couple other ideas here. What else should we got space for a couple other ideas, I should say here. So what should we make some of its other legendary actions? So We can make a couple that are mobility focused if we really want. We can make a burrow, we could make a swim or a climb speed or something like that. And we definitely have a swim speed. We've not given this thing a burrow speed, um, because we've made it a primarily aquatic monster for the most part. Um, we're an amphibious sort of monster, and so a burrow hasn't made sense thus far. Doesn't mean that we can't include one here. Um, but maybe it has something like a sort of a pull kind of a attack. It doesn't do damage along those lines, but it's something like the tongue lash, except it doesn't give the option to. It doesn't restrain the creature. It just pulls them in closer, without doing any damage. Again, something to close the distance to draw something in that was nearby. Or maybe it does do the restraint thing with the tongue lash. It just doesn't do any damage. Um, that's a possibility. We could do something along those lines. Um, so let's pull that in. Let's say, um, what else do we want to do? What else could be unique about this? Um, hmm. Ooh, ooh, okay. What if we did, since we've got this thing, it has sort of a memory kind of effect with it here. Um, what if we did something along the lines of a little, temporary kind of memory wipe kind of idea, right? So because it has the ability that if you look away from it, you can, forget that it's there. But, you know, what if it can do its own little version of like the little Men in Black kind of memory wiper flashy thing, and it effectively becomes invisible to creatures who don't make that saving throw for a moment. Like they can be looking at it, they just kind of flash that they forget it for just like a round, like nothing. Neuralizer, thank you, Mr. Mex. Neuralizer, absolutely. Um, Something along those lines. That it's gets the benefits of invisibility for until the start of its next turn or something like that, or until the start of the next creature's turn or something, something very short, very limited on that. Um, what about that as an idea? Uh, let's see here. Mr. Mex says spider climb makes sense. I've been going back and forth about that one personally, um, because that is one of the first thing. Um, that is one of the first things that I thought about in terms of giving it the ability to kind of climb up walls like that. And um, I can't decide whether that's a good fit for this creature or not. The kind of xenomorph things we've leaned in onto it make me feel like it's a good idea, but then kind of the aquatic, river focused element of this makes me think that maybe it's not. Um, you know, I can't decide. I would love to hear everybody's opinion on that, though. Pros and cons against giving it spider climb, thematically. Um, let's see here. Ben says it has a third eye test. Um, it is a third eye that flashes open. Oh yeah, like the neuralizer. Yeah, okay, yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, it could absolutely do something like that. Little yeah, little third eye that pops open and gives it that sort of the temporary effect of invisibility, just to people who don't save the saving throw or what have you. So we could do what other ideas we could do? We might give ourselves more than just give ourselves some things to choose from. Um, let's get creative here. What are some sort of out of the box things that it could do with its legendary actions? something that it could. Um, let's see here. Ben Elder says maybe it pounces instead of burrowing or climbing. It can pounce distances. Yeah, yeah, I like that, Ben. That's a good one. All right, let's put that down as one of our possibilities. What the keys? All right, pounce. Uh, PBD. Okay, yes, that's a definite option there. Um, okay. Mr. Mech says, I guess with its size, Spider Climb would make sense. If it was something smaller and agile, it would be more fitting. Yeah, I mean, in a fancy world, I mean, I don't know that size matters too much about whether or not something should have spider climb. I mean, there's things like, I'm pretty sure Driders have spider climb and they're big. Um, in fact, I'd be floored if they don't have spider climb. Um, but and they're pretty big. It's more of that I don't know that it fits with the aquatic element here. If we were gonna eschew that, if we were gonna kind of like throw out that original concept of it being a river-based kind of monster, then yeah, I think I'd be far more willing. I'd be far less conflicted, I should say, about giving it spider climb. Um, the Because again, you get things like the xenomorph, right, in fiction that have spider climb. That obviously the xenomorph from Aliens can climb up on things. You see it do it all the time in those movies. Um, so I wouldn't let size hinder you, especially because it's kind of a it's kind of a fun thing for your characters when they realize there's something on the ceiling and they look up and it's enormous. Um, um, it's the little things. Um, but yeah, so it's more of a theme question here for me here as opposed to anything else. It's conflicting me about Spider Climb. But the Pounce I really like. Um, hmm, let's see. Okay, you got mobility pole, invisibility pounce. Let's see if there's any other ideas we've got out there before we winnow these down, before we really hone in on this. What if let's see here, because we've got a lot of other stuff it can do as it gets higher here. Toxic, we've got immunities, we've got this ink fog. Um, hmm. And to that effect, it already has this ink fog thing, which will give it effectively, makes it um, yeah, effectively makes it heavily obscured anyway. So probably don't need the invisibility bit. That could be interesting. Um, so we probably don't need that one. But let's hear Ben Elder says maybe you can use its memory ability to charm a character. Ooh. Ooh, I like where your head's at on this. I really do. Yeah, the ability to either charm a character or to effectively like imprint illusions. Um, you know, yeah, yeah. There, yeah, there's something there where you're saying, yeah, it says, Mr. Mex is maybe someone that is marked. They could try to charm it. Yeah, kind of a lure sort of effect here, potentially. Um, and then Ben says that the character fails a saving throw and sees a loved one or something attacked by villains. Um, yeah, so there's a spell. What is it called? My warlock has it, and I make all kinds of hijinks with it. Let's see here. Let me pull up D&D Beyond on the other side here. The warlock I'm playing as a character tonight has this spell, and it's a ton of fun. And I'm blanking on the memory. I'm blanking on the name of it right now. So let's go to D&D Beyond, and we'll find it. But there's effectively one that you create a hallucinatory sort of a thing in the mind of a creature that you affect with this. And it might be terrain, it might be another hallucinatory creature, but that the person affected by it believes this thing to be totally real. And so, in doing so, they have to uh, engage with it as though it's a real thing. And so, you can make it a snow beast or a pit of lava or a bridge or what have you. And so, what is that spell name? That spell name is Phantasmal Force. That's the one. So, yeah, we could do something along those lines, except it doesn't cause damage per se, but it could be. Um, but yeah, it could. That actually would be pretty cool because it'd give the DM some opportunity to flex some creativity. And so we'll say Phantasmal Force TD, and we'll do an adjustment for that. Obviously, we're not going to do any damage with that. But then also, I think the charm lure is a good one, possibly. I think it's a strong idea. My only question about whether or not it'll be good is you got to think about how a way that it won't directly impact things like Dreadmarked. Because we've got this memory marked ability. We've talked about that quite a bit. But then there's also this upgrade Dreadmark that is a bonus action. TK Monster lets out a psychic scream that can only be heard by those affected by its memory mark trait. All creatures who hear the scream must make a DC. We now know that's a 13. Saving throw. Failure of the creature has frightening condition at the start of the monster's next turn. While friendly as the target must use its movement on its turn to move as far away from TK Monster as possible. Success, the creature is immune to the effects until the start of TK Monster's next turn. So, and how many people could we? Okay, it can be any number of people memory marked. So, interesting. Maybe the charm lure bit is used against creatures that aren't memory marked. Because they have that solid, the people that are memory marked have to have a piece of the creature. They have a solid understanding of its existence, and maybe the ones that don't, it can play with their minds a little bit more, since they're not immune to its memory wiping. Yeah, it's memory wiping effects here. That's an interesting idea. I like that, and it is something that's leaning into some of the psychic effect here, which we've got a little bit in, but it's nothing wrong with reinforcing that theme in this creature. I think that's a good one. Let's see here. Jonathan Frost says reckless attack similar to barbarians triggered when at a certain HP total. It could also go with a flurry of blows. Yeah, so Jonathan, the reckless attack one, yes. That would probably be a bonus action thing as opposed to a legendary action, giving itself advantage while also accepting the fact that it could get disadvantage, or that attacks against it would have advantage. That's a possibility too. The flurry of blows thing again changes the damage output per turn, which affects this creature's CR. And so I would want to lean away from that. Yeah. But let's see here. But let's go ahead and put the bonus action in, and we may hold on to that. We don't want to overcomplicate this creature, but we also don't want to, minimize the things it can do. So bonus action, and it has a couple bonus actions as it evolves, but nothing too early on. And so we could say, reckless attack. Put something like that in there for it. Okay. Ben Elder says maybe a mud slinger ability, throws swamp mud and arc that reduces movement speed. Yeah, dude, that's an idea. You could say, difficult terrain, a difficult terrain ability of some kind. And Jonathan Frost says, Ben order sticky resin. Yeah, you could have some of that goose, some of that ooze that we talked about before. Yeah, these are all good ideas. So now the question is, which three do we want to narrow it down to? The Sorry, reading the comments here. Ben Elder says, "Ooh, yeah, like a trap spider web stuff." Oh, yeah, those things are terrifying. But yes, that will inspire fear in the hearts uh, of of your players if they're anything like me. All right, so yeah, so let's take a vote here. What are the three that we should pick out of this list here? I'll get your guys' thoughts, and then I will tell you my thoughts, or vice versa, depending on how long it takes to get you guys to put your opinions in the chat here. But yeah, we've got mobility as an option. We've got one that's like lets it move around the field a little bit more. We've got pull, one that lets it drag creatures closer to it. One that that affects its visibility. One that is sort of a pounce attack. One that is, or I should say, a pounce movement, not necessarily an attack, but a pounce movement. Then we've got one that is maybe a hallucinatory terrain or effect kind of deal. One that's a psychic lure, and then one that affects the terrain. So let's see. We got our first set of votes in here. Jonathan Frost says one move, one physical, one mental. That's a good balance there. It says pounce, charm, difficult terrain are my votes. Okay, okay. That sounds good to me. Ben says pounce, invisibility, and phantasm charm. Okay, okay. Those are good options there as well. All right. Let's see here, Mr. Max. I know you're might be at work at the moment, but if you've got input, it sounds like as a minimum here, our pounce and our charm effect are going to be the are going to be at least two keepers there. And then Mr. Mike says, I definitely like the pounce and the pull ability if it needs to keep the fight close. They might make the most sense, and maybe Phantasmal Force. Okay, okay. Well, I tell you what. Why don't we go with the pounce, the charm lure, and I think personally with those in there, I like the difficult terrain one the most as the third option there. And here's why. So the pounce handles our mobility one, right? Gives it some more movement around the field. We can give it a little bit of an effect to go along with it. Um, uh, so Yeah, so give it a little bit of give a little effect to go along with it. So we make a cool little mobile combat sort of situation there where it doesn't get stagnant. We've got fun stuff that it can do. And giving it kind of a jump like that too might have it the ability to kind of clear some baddies or clear some of its opponents as it moves around. The charm lure is a cool one, I think, because it affects people who have not protected themselves with this piece of the creature. Something that we that we don't kind of punish later on when we get to the dreadmarked kind of deal. We make it a more difficult choice to choose to remember the creature as opposed to not to, and that helps close the distance. I like that. The reason I don't want to do the pull, even though it was my idea at this point, is it is very similar to the tongue lash, and we have the opportunity to do something that's unique and different here with the charm lore. So I say let's go with that. Um, the invisibility doesn't make as much sense to me anymore, especially because we have the ink fog ability here, and the creature can see through that with its blind sight. So that you know that is one that could become kind of obsolete and at a few iterations in, and so it doesn't give as much longevity to that. And then while I, as a DM, would love to play with the Phantasmal Force option and the ability that can cause hallucinations in its foes, um, that one is that's one of those things that I would absolutely 100% include it in a creature that I was writing just for myself because I know how I'd run it, I know how I'd play with it. Um, but it's one that if I was writing for other people, it would get a little dicier because you want to be a little clearer about the exact effect that it has. Because we can't just copy the spell because that spell does damage. But we also want to give for instances on what they might do, and it requires a lot of creativity on the DM's part. And since we're writing a lot of this stuff to be shared, I'd say we scratch that. So let's strike through. Let's see here. Strike through, and strike through. And this is always the hardest part of coming up with ideas is picking the ones that you want to put in the waste bin. But you gotta winnow them down, or else you'll be working on the same thing forever, and you'll dilute a creature or dilute a situation here. Let's see here. To that end, Ben says maybe keep all and for later versions are different. Or have additional options. Again, you could do that, but again, we're talking, bang for a buck here, right? If we are trying to put time into this creature, um, and uh, and get it out on the table, we already have a lot of things that change about it from time to time, and we've put a lot of effort into that. Um, Also, building up the same set of legendary actions, um, you know, is uh, uh, is time consuming, and I don't know how much value it's going to add versus difficulty in running it. Same thing goes for this random roll list for legendary actions. Again, that's a lot of effort to put into building out a list of actions that that yes will become variable, but again, that's another thing to do, right? As you're getting set up for your fight here, right? So think about it this way as a DM. You are you're running the table, you're getting ready to set up for a fight, you're getting everybody's initiatives in, you're going ahead and you're getting the initiatives for the monsters set up, you're putting everybody in order. You've already got to figure out, how you're accounting for the HP here, whether you're doing this, writing it down or whether you're using a VTT or some other mechanism for that. You need to go through on this particular monster and double check which iteration it is, so you know which abilities it's got going on here. And then to top it all off, you also then have to roll random legendary actions for it. Um, you know that I think that I think that will cause the setup to a fight to stretch and become a bit of a lull and lose some of the energy at the table. And if the ultimate point there is we'll just roll randomly for each of the legendary actions, well, then it doesn't give you as the DM any sort of tactical ability to pick and choose what's best for the moment. It's all randomness. which again weakens the creature, I think. Um, and because unless you just get real lucky with the rolls, there are going to be the choice that you get will be suboptimal a lot of the time. So I'd say in this case, it's better to just pick three, and hold on to these ideas for other monsters in the future, because there will be other cool monsters that we'll need to make. So with that, let's go ahead and start hashing some of these out. Pounce, charm, and difficult terrain, because we've only got about 10 more minutes here. So let's be honest, we're not going to get it done, but we might as well make some headway. All right. So let's see here. Pounce. So there's a whole bunch of like your traditional pounce mechanic with a lot of creatures that you'll see in the monster manual involves them having to move a certain distance, and then they can make this pounce attack. Um, I kind of think it's a cooler idea for this one if it's something that the creature can do from its standing position. Maybe it gets some movement out of it if it wants it, but it doesn't require it. Um, but it just gets this sort of this leap. So maybe we could do something along the lines of the creature moves, yeah. Mr. Rex says, yeah, stationary pounce because it's unexpected. I agree. It's not something that I would think about as a player, on a creature being able to just be in front of me and then just pounce up or pounce up and over me, to get to the other side, maybe to get out of a position where it's flanked or something along those lines. Um, so you know, so we could say that the creature has a vertical jump of some kind. We can say that from a stationary position, the creature can jump up to 10 feet in the air or something along those lines. Uh, you know, and up and over a medium or smaller creature, something and then as part of that movement, they can then choose to move up to half their movement speed or something along those lines. Um, so that this becomes a mobility thing here, that is a little more surprising. So let's hash something out here. Let's see what sounds good. Um, Pounce. So from a stationary position, DK monster can leap up to 10 feet in the air, potentially jumping up and over a medium or smaller creature. This, as part of this movement, either before or after, TK monster can move up to half its speed as well. I should say, in addition to this movement, move up to half its speed. Neither the movement nor the leap provoke attacks of opportunity. Something along those lines. Provokes. Okay, cool. Provokes. Mr. Rex says, yeah, imagine being backline casters and your melee have it surrounded and it just hops away to the squishies. Yeah, right? Terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. That's one of the things. I mean, and that is one of those things that it's such a simple addition. You could toss this into any monster and it wouldn't change its challenge rating at all, but it's completely unexpected. And frankly, it's a fun thing. Like as a DM, you can take a regular monster stat block, one that the players have fought against hundreds and hundreds of times, and add a little thing like this into it, and it becomes a completely different dynamic and a completely different scenario. I mean, think about if you took a zombie stat block and you just also gave it this pounce, you know, this pounce action, this pounce bonus action, where, now you have jumping zombies. Your players would have no idea how to handle that right out of the gate because they've never fought jumping zombies before. And it would affect the challenge rating. It would be something that you could throw at even, low level characters, and it would just mix things up. So fun thing to pull out of your DM tool belt when you're playing, with a bunch of uh, uh, when you're playing with a bunch of newbies, or I should say, a bunch of veterans who are playing, low level characters or something like that, who are, used to fighting regular goblins and kobolds and skeletons and what have you. Give them something, unique. Give your kobold spider climb or something like that. Make it little tweaks like that. Make it different. Make it fun without changing the difficulty. Um, Let's see here. Jonathan Frost says, should the pounce include an athletics jump boost, higher modifier? Um, I wouldn't. I I wouldn't think so, but I'd love to hear your thought on that. What kind of what kind of bump are you thinking about there, and how would it be applicable in this situation? Since they don't have to make an athletics check to do this. Um, but maybe I'm missing something. So yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, Jonathan. Um, let's see here. Mr. Mike says tactics go out the window because it's unpredictable now. Exactly. You have mixed things up with very little actual change. Then hopping vampires. Yep, yep. Uh, why not? Why not? Uh, you're the DM. You can do all kinds of stuff. All right. Um, so let's see. I guess we're kind of at our time here before we jump into our charm lure and the difficult terrain effect here. Um, you know, I think we can go ahead and put a pin in things here for the moment. Um, yeah, cool. I'm happy with what we've come up with. Um, so yeah, well, we have a perfectly viable monster previous to this that we can run and play around with. This is going to make it a little more viable in this sort of situation that we're, um, uh, in the situation that we are envisioning this creature to appear in. And I think it'll also make it a little more surprising for our characters. Fun stuff to throw out there as they encounter this creature again and again and again. So ton of good ideas here. You guys came with some great stuff. The pounce, the charm lure, difficult terrain. None of those were my ideas, and those were all from you guys. Those are real winners. I'm really excited to help to continue building those out. I think it'll be a lot of fun. Let's see here real quick. Last few comments in the chat. Mr. Mex says this creature is going to be a menace. It is, which is fantastic. That's exactly what we want. A menace. And then Jonathan Frost says a +3 strength mod. Make it 7 strength mod. The pounce gives it more distance. Yeah, I mean you could do it that way. I personally would just say it would just give the pounce a defined range. They can jump up. They can jump up to so many feet or that kind of thing. So you're not having to do math on how the jump works in the fly. Um, because yes, while there is math, there is a formula for that. It's pretty straightforward to figure out exactly how far you can do a standing leap and a running leap and that kind of deal. Um, you know, there's there's no reason to not have that math done up ahead of time and just define it in the feature here. Just smooths things out when you're actually running it. Gives you fewer things to manage behind the screen. Cool. All right. Well, it is 7 o'clock, so we're gonna go ahead and wrap this up here. Um, I again want to thank you guys for joining me. It's always a good time when you're here. If you enjoy this sort of content, please like, subscribe, leave a comment. If you have any questions, thoughts, ideas, concerns, anything else, jump in the comments in this video. Leave them. Let me know what you think. If you've got suggestions we've had some requests for some other special episodes where we talk about specific topics. If you've got some more suggestions for that or other questions you might have, feel free to leave those in the comments as well. Happy to get to those. And otherwise, thank you so much for joining me today, and I look forward to catching up with you next time. I'll talk to you then. Have a great night, everybody, and I will see you soon.